Chelsea set for midfield. Shake-up as Alex Scott talks advance amid Enzo Fernandez deadline. Chelsea are facing a potentially dramatic Friday as the future of Enzo Fernandez takes another major turn, with Manchester City pushing to sign the Argentine midfielder and the Blues simultaneously working behind the scenes on a possible replacement in the form of Bournemouth star Alex Scott. According to reports emerging today, Chelsea have set Manchester City a firm deadline of 5 p.m. on Friday, August 14th, to submit a formal offer worth £120 million for Fernandes. If City fail to put that amount on the table by the deadline, Chelsea are prepared to close the door on the transfer and keep their midfielder at Stamford Bridge. However, the situation has become increasingly complicated because Chelsea are already planning for life without Fernandes. The name at the centre of those plans is Alex Scott. The Bournemouth midfielder has emerged as one of Chelsea's preferred options to strengthen their midfield should Fernandes leave, and conversations between Chelsea and Bournemouth are believed to be continuing away from the spotlight. There is now a growing feeling around the situation that Chelsea want to move quickly. The club do not want to sell one of their most important midfielders and then spend weeks searching for a replacement. Their strategy appears to be clear. If Manchester City meet the £120 million valuation, Chelsea want to have their replacement operation ready to move immediately. And that is where Scott becomes extremely important. Manchester City have until 5 p.m. The biggest piece of the story remains Enzo Fernandez. Manchester City are interested in Fernandes as they prepare for possible changes in their midfield, particularly with the uncertainty surrounding Rodri. Reports indicate that City have identified the Chelsea midfielder as a major option if they need to rebuild that position. Chelsea, however, are not prepared to negotiate indefinitely. The club's position is reportedly straightforward: £120 million in cash submitted before the Friday deadline. If Manchester City submit the required proposal, the situation could accelerate very quickly. If they do not, Chelsea are expected to consider the Fernandes transfer closed for this window. That deadline has created enormous pressure on City. Manchester City have already been involved in significant midfield spending this summer, including the reported £116 million acquisition of Elliot Anderson, while they are also dealing with the possibility of Rodri leaving for Barcelona. That means City have important decisions to make. Do they commit another enormous fee to bring Fernandes to the Etihad? Or do they decide that the £120 million price is too high and walk away? Chelsea are now waiting for that answer. City preparing their move. There are reports that Manchester City are preparing to make their move during Friday's afternoon. One report has suggested that City could be ready to submit their bid around 3 p.m, giving them enough time to meet Chelsea's 5 p.m. deadline if the proposal satisfies the Blues. But there is still uncertainty over the exact structure and currency of any potential offer. Reports from Thursday indicated that a figure of around €120 million had been discussed, while Chelsea's demand is understood to be specifically around £120 million. That distinction could become crucial. Chelsea do not want a complicated package dominated by bonuses or future payments. Their message is, effectively, if City want Enzo Fernandez, they must meet the valuation. That puts the next few hours under intense scrutiny. Chelsea already looking at Alex Scott. While Manchester City focus on Fernandes, Chelsea are looking in the opposite direction. The Blues have identified Bournemouth's Alex Scott as a potential midfield replacement, and talks are believed to be progressing behind the scenes. Scott is not a completely new name on Chelsea's radar. The 22-year-old has already attracted significant attention from some of the biggest Premier League clubs after developing into one of Bournemouth's most technically gifted midfielders. Sky Sports previously reported that Scott had attracted interest from Chelsea, Arsenal and Manchester United after turning down a new contract proposal from Bournemouth. Chelsea's interest has therefore been building for some time, but Fernandez's situation has given that interest a completely different level of urgency. The Blues now have a decision to make. If Fernandes stays, Scott could remain a target for future planning. If Fernandes leaves for Manchester City, however, Scott could become one of Chelsea's most important transfer priorities immediately. Bournemouth have already rejected Chelsea. Chelsea have already tested Bournemouth's resolve. Reports indicate that Bournemouth rejected an initial Chelsea proposal of around £64 million for Scott earlier in the window. Chelsea have not abandoned the player though, and the Blues are believed to have continued discussions regarding a possible agreement. That rejection means Chelsea may have to significantly improve their proposal. Bournemouth know that Chelsea could potentially receive £120 million from Manchester City for Fernandes, and that changes the financial dynamic completely. If Chelsea sell Fernandes for £120 million, Bournemouth can reasonably expect Chelsea to have the resources to make a major investment in Scott. This is why the negotiations could become extremely interesting once the Fernandes situation is resolved. A secret operation? The latest information suggests that Chelsea's conversations with Bournemouth are being conducted quietly. That would make sense from the club's perspective. Chelsea do not want to publicly announce that they are preparing for Fernandez's departure before Manchester City have actually submitted the required bid. At the same time, they cannot afford to wait until the last minute to begin searching for a replacement. The ideal scenario for Chelsea would therefore be to reach a broad understanding with Bournemouth over Scott before the Fernandes situation is officially resolved. Then, if City meet the £120 million deadline, Chelsea can immediately accelerate negotiations. This is why Friday could become a decisive day for both transfers. One deal could finance the other. Why Alex Scott? Chelsea's interest in Scott is understandable. The Bournemouth midfielder offers technical quality, mobility and versatility, making him capable of operating in different midfield roles. He has also gained valuable Premier League experience, which is particularly important for Chelsea as they look to maintain a competitive squad. Rather than signing a midfielder who needs months to adapt to English football, Chelsea would be bringing in a player who already understands the intensity and tactical demands of the Premier League. Scott's ability to carry the ball, combine with teammates and contribute defensively makes him an attractive option for Chelsea's midfield project. And at just 22, he also fits the club's preference for players who can develop over several seasons. The timing is everything. The most fascinating part of this story is the timing. Chelsea have reportedly given Manchester City until 5 p.m. today. At approximately 3 p.m, City are expected to be preparing their move according to reports surrounding the saga. That would leave only 2 hours between the potential submission of the bid and Chelsea's deadline. If the bid arrives and meets the £120 million requirement, Chelsea could immediately switch their attention towards finalising Scott. If City do not meet the valuation, Chelsea can simply tell Fernandes that he remains part of the squad and continue with their existing plans. This is effectively a two-path transfer strategy. Path 1, Manchester City pay £120 million, Fernandes leaves and Chelsea push hard for Alex Scott. Path 2, City fail to meet the deadline, Fernandes stays and Chelsea do not have to make an emergency midfield replacement. ENZO's future could be decided today. Fernandes remains one of Chelsea's most important players, so selling him would represent a huge decision. Chelsea signed him from Benfica in January 2023 for a British record package reported at around £106.8 million. Since then, he has become an important part of the club's midfield. That is why Chelsea's £120 million valuation is so significant. The Blues are effectively saying that if another Premier League giant wants to take one of their key midfielders, they must pay a premium. Manchester City now have to decide whether Fernandes is worth that investment. If they believe he is the midfielder they need, the next few hours could see the entire saga explode. Alex Scott. Waiting in the wings, behind all of this, Alex Scott remains the player Chelsea are watching most closely. The negotiations with Bournemouth are not necessarily dependent on Fernandes leaving, but his departure would undoubtedly increase Chelsea's urgency. Chelsea have already demonstrated that they are willing to invest heavily in Scott, with their earlier £64 million proposal reportedly rejected. Now, with the possibility of a £120 million Fernandes sale, the Blues could have the financial strength to return with a substantially improved offer. That could potentially change Bournemouth's position. However, Chelsea still need to negotiate carefully. Bournemouth will not want to lose one of their best midfielders without receiving a fee that reflects his importance. Friday could be a defining day. The next several hours could therefore determine the direction of Chelsea's midfield for the entire season. Manchester City have until 5 p.m. Chelsea want £120 million. City are considering the move. Chelsea are simultaneously maintaining talks with Bournemouth over Alex Scott.